Well, good morning. We are here this morning with Paul Bennett, who is connecting with us from Cape Town. So Paul and his family live on a boat and travel wherever their hearts feel to take them. And the reason we're chatting with Paul this morning is part of our series on resources. So at Streams, we have our website, which you can sign up to for free as a member. And if you visit our website, you can go and read stories from home educators, different things that they've had to encounter or overcome in their journey. And you can also go and read reviews of different home educating resources. We also have a monthly blog and a monthly newsletter. And when we've got time, we pop in at Clubhouse as well. So there's quite a lot going on at Streams. And if you haven't signed up before, I really suggest you do, because we're really trying to build a lovely community there of support and encouragement for home educators. So I encountered Paul a few months ago, Paul, I think before the Learn Free conference, we got chatting. And I just thought Paul's story was pretty interesting, because he comes from this background of kind of world schooling, boat schooling, whatever you want to call it, schooling. And he's going to tell us a little bit about that in a minute. And then that led to him kind of thinking, what works for my family? What do we need to do? And that has actually led to them establishing Cicero Learning. So we're going to hear all about that today. So Paul, I'm going to spotlight you. Now, the first thing I'd like you to do is just tell everyone a little bit about who you are, a little bit of background, and what led you to take on this big adventure of traveling on a boat, which I'm sure has many challenges. Just such a fun adventure for a family, but adventures also have a challenging side as well. So we'd love to hear a little bit about that in terms of what that's meant for you as a family, and then we'll talk a little bit about Cicero.
Sure. Well, I mean, first of all, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed coming to the conference last month and meeting you, and this is a real treat to connect with your audience. About me and my great adventures. Well, I mean, like you said, I could tell a story. It's just, every day is sunny and tropical, and my kids are all perfectly lined up doing their work. But as we all know, that's not reality. So I'll tell you the story, warts and all. So my background, and my wife and I are entrepreneurs. We had a travel business for a number of years where we connected travelers to various cities around the world, like Rome, Paris, these kinds of places, with local experts. It was like a matchmaking business. It was super fun. It was in the travel industry. We got to travel quite a bit. We lived in Italy and Paris. And that was super successful. We sold that business and we bought a boat and went sailing with our 3 daughters. And we had done some sailing before, actually, while we ran that business. We took our daughters. They were young at that point. The youngest was 5 years old and the oldest was 10. And we took them on a 2-year trip. We started in the Caribbean and we sailed to Australia. And that was our first taste of homeschooling or world schooling or boat schooling. I mean, the way we did it was whatever we can do schooling. We didn't really know what we were doing. We kind of felt our way. And so when I meet people today who are in that same position, not sure how to approach homeschooling, whether they should have a curriculum or make it up as they go along or unschool, or there's a lot of different flavors. I'm very sympathetic to that, because we were in that same place. We spent a year without much of a plan. This wonderful little school that we took our kids out of. We weren't dissatisfied with school. We just wanted an adventure. And the wonderful little school told us, you know what, you don't have to worry about doing anything for them while you're traveling. The travel itself will be educational. And there was some truth to that. A lot of our school plan with our children has been place-based and based around, where we are. But we didn't find after a year we needed some structure. So we gravitated towards a couple of different curriculums. I guess we were what you would call a eclectic homeschooler. So we did that when they were young. We went back to real life and back to school. And a couple of years later, when the kids were a little older, we picked up a boat in Australia, really just picking right up where we left off, and started sailing. We've been out 4 years. So 6 of the last 9 years, we've been boat schooling our kids. On the second adventure, my oldest daughter was a rising junior in high school. So, we felt, and I run into a lot of parents who feel this way, felt like things were getting a bit serious. She knew she wanted to go to college. She seemed like a good fit for college. So we wanted her on that path. And we weren't super confident that we'd be able to help her out on that path. So we came up with the idea of, let's hire a teacher, one teacher for one subject, just to ensure that she has something at that level, the level that a college would expect. So we hired this wonderful teacher named Hadley Westman, who had incidentally gone to the same high school my daughter was in, so she kind of knew that approach. And it was a game changer for us. The relationship that my oldest daughter, Stella, created with this teacher, the bond of trust, her learning just went through the roof. And so we saw that happening, and we felt like we had sort of hit upon something, and we started doing it for her sisters and adding classes. And we can talk a little bit about that model if you'd like. But that's sort of how how I come to homeschooling. Probably like a lot of people, I just sort of stumbled into it and found my way. Found our direction.
It's just, I think it's just fascinating, this idea of, giving up your home. And the thing is, you're not just going on a little narrow boat along a canal, which is fun in itself. You're on the ocean. And I do really want to just digress this the curious,
Sure.
the curious nosy person who wants to know, could you tell us some of your experiences on the ocean? I mean, I'm sure you must have hit storms and that kind of thing. I would really like to know how you've handled that.
Yeah. So hello. This is Matt speaking, and as well, Paul. I love the fact that you just said, yeah, we got a boat and we went from the Caribbean to Australia. Oh my goodness, that's incredible. That's such a journey. I love you covered that in one sentence. I'd be really interested to hear some of the adventures as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's been an incredible adventure, and we've sailed on from there to Cape Town. We're almost, we're more than 3/4 of the way through our circumnavigation. I mean, it has been the experience, the journey of a lifetime. In terms of the sailing, it's interesting. We've covered a lot of miles, and we certainly have sailed across several oceans at this point, all of them. Well, not the South Atlantic, I guess. That's the next one. But, the sailing part of it is only like, 5% of the time, 10%. Most of our time is spent at anchor in some, far-flung location. So, day-to-day life looks kind of similar to everybody else's life, except there are all these, it's sort of like bizarro world. We live on a boat, so we live on solar and batteries, and if we want to go to the store, we have to get into a dinghy or a tender, I think you call it in the UK, and go into shore. It's, one of the things that we love about this mode of travel is it's so very different than traditional travel, right? Traditional travel, you show up via the airport, you come in, you go to a hotel or an Airbnb, you're sort of in that tourist corridor, and it can be hard to sort of escape that. And you're there for 2 weeks on a holiday. For us, we come in the back door, right? We sail into the harbor and put an anchor down, and then we go ashore. And we stay as long as we want. We've stayed at anchor. I mean, we got stuck during the pandemic in a very remote part of Sumatra, and we spent 6 months in an anchorage. We weren't allowed by the authorities to sail away. It was great. I mean, every day we had coconuts and volleyball on the beach and surfing, which was great in Sumatra. In terms of the sailing part of it, I mean, that's our life, right? I have 3 daughters, and all 3 girls know how to fix a diesel engine. They know how to reef a sail. When we cross oceans, we sail 24 hours around the clock. There's no anchoring in, 7,000 meters deep seas. So someone's on watch at all times. And when the kids were really young, my wife and I split the watches, and we might have a child on our laps. I have a really great memory of my middle daughter, Cleo, sharing a watch with me as we crossed the equator, going from Panama to Ecuador. She was young. She was 9 years old, 10 years old. And there was an eclipse. And I turned on the phone and recorded us watching the eclipse on watch in the middle of the night. Super magical. Now that the girls are older, and my oldest have actually flown the coop. So my oldest daughter's off to university, and my middle daughter just graduated from our boat school a couple of months ago, I guess, at this point, and she's off doing a summer job before she heads to university. But now that the girls are older, they also have watches. So we will split the night into thirds and the day into thirds, and I'll take 4 hours. My wife will take 4 hours, and then 2 sisters usually will pair up and take 2 hours, and they're in charge. I go to sleep middle of the night, middle of the ocean. They're in charge of keeping track of the weather, keeping track that everything's functioning on the boat. We're not going to hit anything. There's no lights on the horizon. And then I, 9 times out of 10 sleep right through that watch, and there's nothing, no need for me to wake up, and they've got it all sort of under control. So it's been a tempering experience for all of us. It's brought us closer together as a family. It's taught my girls some really valuable life skills. And we've had just the most amazing experiences, both of the natural world and also of really far-flung cultures. After we left Australia, we sailed over the top of Papua New Guinea. So we spent a lot of time in Vanuatu, the Solomon Islands, and Papua New Guinea before entering Indonesia. It was about a year. So my kids have spent time in villages where there's no electricity, and people have to walk to carry water, and they live off of what they can catch on the reef. And that, I think, has taught them a lot about sort of their place in the world and our world in general.
That is such a wonderful education you're giving them. You actually can't put a price on what you've given them and the insight that they will have into other cultures. If you think of everything they've had to learn by the age they've had to learn it, and the amount of responsibility they're learning to carry, it just is amazing. And I know you felt like you needed more structure, but probably, just those experiences alone would have given them a very, very well, rounded education. So let's think about now, you felt at some point you needed more structure. So you had an idea to try something different, or to try something that worked for you guys. And so I want you to go into a bit more detail. You touched on that a bit briefly, but go into a bit more detail on that, and then how that grew into Cicero.
Yeah. Well, so, we have a really great relationship with our kids. We trust each other. And I think a lot of that is because we live in close quarters here on the boat. You can sort of see the boat behind me. But, we're not teachers. We've learned a lot. I've taught quite a few classes to my kids, but as they've gotten older, they really wanted to be in charge of their own learning, which is great. I, much prefer that. But they also sort of outgrew us and needed something more challenging. And, partly our situation, so, we live in a time of incredible abundance for homeschoolers, right? There's just so much to choose from today. But a lot of it requires really good internet, which we didn't have necessarily. And my daughters also really wanted that bond and that connection with a teacher. They've always really enjoyed their teachers. They were fortunate back on land to go to some small class size schools. And they really wanted that, and they wanted it to be a different adult than us, right? I mean, they have a relationship with us, and I'm able to successfully teach them some things, but they wanted something else. And we didn't quite know exactly, what we were giving them when we hired the first private teacher, Hadley, but it became really obvious very, very quickly that what they got from that was a very strong bond with another adult, bond around a love of learning, right? That's a great teacher is, kind of put the content aside. It's not really about the content. It's about instilling igniting a passion for learning. A great teacher is a lifelong learner. And we were fortunate to find some great teachers. And, with only a few sessions, I think our English language arts teacher, Hadley, only does one session a week for an hour. So it's not a ton of face time. We had a biology teacher who did 2 sessions and a math teacher who did 2 sessions. So it was a little more, but still, it's not a lot of, class time. But still, those sessions, that touching base, that, it just accelerated their learning to such a degree. And we could see it, because we're all in the same room, and I can hear what they're talking about with the teacher. Afterwards, they come kind of bouncing out into the cockpit. You won't believe what, we talked about today. And it was palpable, when a kid's got traction. And it's an interesting thing. Traction's a word we use a lot on the boat because its opposite is distraction, right? So when a kid's got traction into something, there's no denying it, especially as a homeschooler, because you're so plugged into your kids. And we just saw that, wow, this is a way for our kids to get traction around a love of learning, around certain topics. And it just, like I said before, it became a game changer for us. So I think in the second year, we added a math teacher, and then we added science teacher. And every girl has a different teacher, right? It's one teacher, one subject, one-on-one learning. And so that's part of it as well, right? It's like school with a class size of 1. And we like to say it's sort of like an ancient model. I studied the classics in graduate school, and I read Rousseau's Emile, and of course Aristotle, who was the tutor of or the teacher of Alexander the Great, and Marcus Aurelius had private teachers, right? It's a classical ancient idea for the aristocracy, and what we've sort of hit upon is what we're doing with this model is sort of reviving that model, updating it for sort of modern standards, and democratizing, making it available to non-aristocrats like myself.
And so how did that become Cicero then?
So like I mentioned before, my wife Lonnie and I are entrepreneurs. We had another business. I do a lot of consulting and advising for startups and investors and helping people build businesses. And we, when we were sailing through Papua New Guinea, we were constantly talking about what's our next business going to be? And a great business is one that solves a problem. And it became apparent eventually that we had solved a big problem in our lives. It's our children's education is probably the most important thing after their health, I guess. So it's a lot at stake for us. And we felt like we'd really solved that problem. And so it didn't take much math to figure out, oh, okay, there's a business here. Now, is it a huge, scaling business, I don't know. I mean, maybe every kid in the world needs a private teacher, but it definitely is one that has a heck of an impact. And we saw this with our kids. That was one of the things we didn't know, though. Like, or maybe we're just weird, and it works for us. We launched in January, so about 6 months ago, and we had our first kind of cohort of students. Cohort's probably not the right word because they're all doing individual learning with individual teachers. But we had a group come through, about a dozen students, and I was holding my breath, like, God, I hope this works out. And about halfway through, I started to get the emails and the calls, first from the parents telling me that their children had a sea change. We had a couple of kids who, well, not a couple, quite a few kids who were severely disrupted during the pandemic. And they had lost their love of learning. And coming in and connecting with the teacher after a couple of weeks and building that bond of trust, they got back their mojo, basically. It gives me chills now, actually, to think about it. It was just really powerful. Then I started getting emails from the teachers, right? And these are veteran teachers who've been teaching 20, 30 years in classrooms. And they couldn't believe the power of the one-on-one model, and how it allows you to create a relationship with a kid and go deep with them and tailor it to them, right? So one of our mottos is it's student-centered, right? So the teachers asked me, okay, well, how should I, design this curriculum? And the first step is meet the student and figure out where she's at, and then meet her there and design the curriculum to pull her forward, stretching her, challenging her, but also, allowing her or him to master the content. And anyhow, I mean, it was a game changer for these families and for these teachers. So, I mean, it's just a few weeks ago that the classes ended, and we're still kind of riding a wave of euphoria because it looks like it actually really works, not just for us, not just for a crazy family on a boat in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. So from what I understand is that your business is the connecting.
Yeah.
And so you have like a pool of teachers, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do. So it's very similar to our first business, right, where we were the connectors between local guides and then visitors. And there's a lot of different ways you can connect people, right? There's the pure marketplace. You just, hey, go up on our website. You go up on our website. Good luck. And then there's the curated marketplace, right, where you select certain people on the supply side, so that the teachers, you select certain ones to come in, and then you give them support and guidance, so that because that's the model that we're using in Cicero. And I think it's a really important one because for a lot of these teachers, this is new, right? Teaching one-on-one remote without a state mandated curriculum. They love it, but it's a new thing. So they need quite a bit of guidance from us, sort of at a high strategic level, about how to execute this. And then the families need some support, right? They need someone to turn to if things aren't working out correctly. Assessments and things along these lines, we provide as well.
So if at the moment, is it primarily focusing on American content? Most of your teachers from America?
Our teachers are all over the world. So we have, they're based all over the world, and they're also of various nationalities. We have quite a few Americans, and our customers are largely North American, Canadian, and US. We have some European. One of the issues here, and you probably hear this a lot, working in stream, is so in the US, our universities have a path for homeschoolers. It's been there for a little while, like a decade or so, but it is a very robust path now. Like pretty much every university has a counselor for homeschoolers. They have a process that it's homeschooling friendly. So most of our classes are designed for that, to kind of help a kid get into an American university, because it's much more doable. That said, we do have a couple of teachers that teach the IG, CSEs, and the A levels, and a couple of other things like that. But this is probably a bit controversial, but my oldest daughter looked at UK schools, and as a homeschooler, knocking on the doors of UK schools, they told us basically forget about it, except for St. Andrews and Trinity. But everybody else said, oh no, you don't have your A levels or your SAT subject tests. You're out of luck. Whereas the US schools were like, oh, you're a homeschooler. Here's the name of the person who's in charge of you. And we would write to that person, and they'd be like, oh my God, you live on a boat. What are you doing? Okay, like this is what you have to do. You have to write a great essay. You have to have an amazing kind of portfolio. You do have to take the SATs. But it's a pretty, I wouldn't say it was a low bar, but it was a clear path. So Cicero is evolving in that direction to support that path. College-bound kids.
Yeah, I would say that the UK isn't quite there yet, but they are getting there. And there actually are universities that have actually said they will consider sort of less orthodox methods of education. I think that the results are starting to come in, that actually these kids are fine, and they're they
more
think
than
differently,
fine,
and they don't need to be motivated, and they know how to manage their time and their own learning. My daughter's I went with my daughter to a university open day here, and overheard one of the sort of lecturers telling a parent, oh, we spend the first year teaching them how to manage their own learning. So I said to my daughter, well, you could probably just pop to second year, then you'll be all right, because she's been doing that 100%. Very well, So I certainly wouldn't say it's always worth a try. Actually, even in the UK, it's worth a try if you've got an unorthodox approach. So it just depends who's on the other end, looking at the application.
To your point, things are changing so fast, right? More people are homeschooling now than ever before in the US and the UK. So yeah, these institutions are going to have to accommodate that. The demand is there, and I think it's just going to increase. One group of parents that have come into Cicero are digital nomads. A couple of years ago, digital nomad was a 27-year-old, with no kids, who could like work from Bali, and she just had to convince her employer. Now we have tons of families who are, renting out their house and going and spending 6 months in Portugal and 6 months in Bulgaria. There's all sorts of facilities, hubs to support them. And
it sounds like you've connected with Liz Quain somewhere along the way.
Liz is a great figure in that movement. There's a whole bunch of luminaries there, and that's a space that we like to play in, because we can support those families. I mean, that's sort of what I am.
And how do you normally set that up? Do you have like a package, or how do people kind of, if somebody comes to you, what are the things that they look at and have to consider?
So flexibility is one of our main mantras, right? I needed flexibility as a customer, right? There were, weeks when we had bad internet, and we would have to pause a class and then restart. And we had weird hours and everything like that. So everything is custom designed to the child and to the family. We think of it as a sort of three-way partnership between three stakeholders: the student, which is kind of the primary stakeholder, the teacher, and then the family, right? So we interview the family. What are your needs? And so for a digital nomad family, one of them is, well, we're going to be in this time zone. And I have this one family who are just crazy surfers. They're boys. They have 4 boys, I think, and they're big wave surfers. They were in Portugal for a while. Now they're in Bali. So their lives revolve around surfing. And that was one of when the mom came in, she was like, okay, so here are some of of our constraints. No school before 11 a.m. because the boys are surfing, right? So we we mold and flex to that. We find a teacher that can accommodate that, and it's all a la carte, right? So there's no curriculum, there's no standard. One family might come in and say, "Oh, we'll do a single class." Another family might come in and say, "I want to do full load, 5 classes," and we flex to that.
The surfing sounds amazing. I grew up in a seaside town, and I know that it was always early on the beach
Right.
to go and get your surfing in. And obviously, if you're at sea, that's something you kind of have to wait till you're somewhere where you can get Wi-Fi again, right?
Right.
No 4G out on the
absolutely.
ocean or anything like
Well,
that.
it is again rapidly changing. So we've been waiting for Starlink now for, I got on the list for Starlink 5 years ago, I think, and now everybody's getting it. All the boats, not here in Cape Town, but up ahead of us in the Caribbean, all the boats I know up there are getting the Starlink and they're getting connected.
Yeah.
So that's going to totally change
everything,
right? And it's going to change education. It means that your kids can have a class with a teacher or plug into whatever, Khan Academy or OutSchool or whatever, anywhere.
Amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So in terms of, I know that, we have a lot of home educators who are living on single incomes and maybe don't have a business on the side. So do you have different sort of pricing structures, or is it basically you do what you can afford? How do you kind of have anything around that?
So the pricing is tied to sort of what we call teacher hours, right? So teacher hours are determined by sort of three things. One is the duration of the course. A common, a semester is like 15 weeks, so that's our most common duration. But you can make them shorter. You can make a course a mini course, 13 weeks, 10 weeks. This summer we're doing curiosity camps that are like 2-3 weeks long. So that's one thing. The other is the cadence, right? So if you are doing a class where you want your child to have a live session, 2 times a week, 3 times a week, even more, then that's more teacher hours. And then the third is, what is the content of the class? So is the teacher free to just design the content around her experience? Then that's very low prep time, right? She doesn't have to do much. She's taught a really successful class before, she'll bring it. But if she has to do a lot of customization, for example, I have a client right now who wanted a physics class for her 15-year-old son, and she wanted it. They also live on a boat. Okay, so we have another boat customer. And she wanted it tailored to his life on the boat, specifically around electricity, understanding how their lithium battery system works, how solar works, how to understand, DC and AC voltage, and do some labs that involve the work. So now the teacher, this is a physics teacher, so she's taught physics before, but now she's having to do a really intense sort of electrical course and very much understanding what's on the boat and tailoring it to. So there's some extra hours there, and that'll change the cost as well.
Yeah, because you've got some teachers that are very subject specific as well, and then so then would you still find that they have the same bond? So if they've got different teachers for different subjects, do you think that bond still builds up, or do you think it's more if they just have one person kind of guiding them through?
So in terms of the bond, I think it varies, right? Every bond is different. I just think about my own daughter. She has 3 teachers this past spring. She loved them all, but she has very different relationships with each of her teachers. They're very different teachers. They have different styles, and so the learning journey is quite different with each of them. I think that's a strength to have variety. When customers come in, I really discourage them from getting one teacher to teach multiple subjects. First of all, the teachers are all subject matter experts. So a math teacher, I mean, down in the really younger ages, like in primary school, teachers do double duty. But once you get to middle school, they begin to specialize in their areas. So that's one part of it. But the other part is, I think it's really rich. If you're going to do 2 classes, one of the key pieces of this experience is that your child has builds a relationship with another adult who is a kind of learning mentor. And if you're going to spend twice the money, get 2 different experiences and give 2 different views of it, I think it just creates a richer experience.
Yeah. And where are you finding your teachers from? How are you recruiting and screening and all of that?
So we, everything, word of mouth, right? So our last business had an education component. A lot of our experts were master's level, PhD level art historians, archaeologists. And we built that network up, sort of word of mouth through the network. So we found a couple of teachers, and then they've brought in other teachers. So it's sort of the network effects. Also, I mean, we're in a moment right now where teachers are leaving the profession. And what you read those headlines, that's, 1 out of 6 teachers in the UK have left the profession. What the reality is they're leaving the institution because it's become untenable for them and for a variety of reasons, but they still love teaching. That's their identity, their core. So we're tapping into that. It's an opportunity for us to find these teachers and to give them freelance work of a different kind, but that it touches that core purpose that they have.
Yeah. And do you have sort of like a screening interview? Do you have certain requirements for them to comply with?
Yeah, we're building that. When you start a small business, you're always building the airplane while you fly it. So we do everything. Everything's high touch. So every teacher has to make an application with certain things they have to do around their teaching philosophy and their CV and their LinkedIn. And then I do a 1-hour interview with them and understand sort of their background, get a sense of who they are. And then we do a test class, put them in the field with a student. And often the guinea pig is my own children. And just see, how they work. But we can tell a lot in that interview, an hour,
Yeah, because you really want your children's passion to be ignited. And so you want to see how do they engage with the student. And then, of course, as we are getting more and more in this country, obviously you've got safeguarding checks, right, and all of that. Do you have any of those that you have to comply with?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't think there are any regulations on us, but we have to comply, right? So we do background checks on every teacher that comes in. And, at first I wasn't even thinking about that. It's remote, right? Like what could happen over the internet?
Yeah.
And then one of our teachers was like, you should do background checks. So we do background checks on every teacher.
I love the story, and I love what you're trying to do, because I think for some families that will work, so obviously, people try different things, and for some families it sounds like you're able to kind of handle a lot of the kind of worry of how your children are going to be okay, how they're going to get through education. Will they be a failure? Will I have let them down? So you're kind of helping to tick some of those boxes for them, and giving that reassurance to parents.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yep. Yeah. And then for sort of seasoned homeschoolers who don't have those worries, our value add is that we're someone outside of the home, an educator. And that's a case where I think with a seasoned homeschooler, it's more like a layering on of something extra, especially if you're, building that transcript for college and you want to put in, actually, my son took this Cicero class in literature, and we do a lot of sort of college prep work, right? So 11th grade, 12th grade classes, will often be, okay, like an English class, will a big part of the deliverable in the class will be the essay, the personal essay.
And is all of it one-on-one, or do you ever have sort of group sessions where a teacher may have a few children in a session?
So currently it's all one-on-one because we've just started and we're super small. The idea is eventually we would allow people to group, and that would bring the price down, which would be great. I don't think we'd ever do anything more than like 3 or 4 students in a group. The other thing, there's a kind of middle ground that we're aiming at on the way there, which is if we have enough students, we have a teacher Slack, and so the teachers talk to each other. If let's say there's a biology teacher teaching one student over here and another biology teacher teaching another student over here, and they're more or less the same level, they could connect on Slack and say, hey, let's do a project together. And so they have their classes one-on-one, but then they could come together for a couple of weeks to do something together. We'd like to build that in as well.
Yeah. And how's business going? Are you finding that you're getting a good response from families?
I am. It's a tough business because it's something very new, right? We have to convince people that they should do this. They should pack up their home and go sail the world, and don't worry, it's going to be okay. We'll get you teachers.
Yeah, but you're not just for the world schoolers. Actually, anyone can make use of your services, and
right.
It's just really about getting the word out, because I do encounter many parents who do have a worry, especially if they've taken their children out at an older age, because we have a lot of parents that we deal with that sometimes the child is coming out at like 13, 14, where in this country, certainly that's when you're actually needing to prepare for exams. And I think this would certainly help with a transition of that nature.
Yeah, I mean, the business was basically built for that problem. That's exactly the problem I faced. We didn't have exams, but we had a 16-year-old or 15-year-old who wanted to go to college, and we wanted to make sure that she would be prepared to do that.
Yes.
We do that really well.
Yeah, it certainly sounds very interesting. What is your website? The details of your website?
So it's CiceroLearning.com. So Cicero, like the ancient Roman statesman and philosopher.
So we've had a few sort of comments from particularly Amy, where she was asking, her son was asking a question about houseboats. Now, I don't know if you know this, maybe Matt knows this, but do you know why houseboats steer from the back?
Houseboats steer from the back. Well, a lot of boats steer from the back.
True.
Houseboats are odd. We people who live on boats don't consider them to be boats because they're not.
Well, they are houses on water.
Exactly, they're houses on water, so they're not. I mean, they're all different. There's actually a houseboat manufacturer here in Cape Town that makes a pretty seaworthy little. It's more of like a canal boat, those boats they have.
The sort of pleasure boats and that kind of thing. It takes the tourists out, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Whale watching.
And this one actually steers from the front. So exception to the rule.
Yes, I mean, Amy, that's something for your son to go and do some homework on, a little bit of a learning experience there for him. But she did say that you've thought what you were describing sounds idyllic. I think for a parent, certainly, if it takes some of that pressure off you and you're able to have a good life experience, do something different, but know that that box is ticked for you, it's certainly very, very helpful. So what I would actually love is if you've got any of your users who would want to perhaps submit a review about Cicero for us to put on the website. That would be really, really good, so we can hear from someone who's used it. I think that would be great. But what a lot of fun. I think I have said to you one day I want a tour of the boat. So I think that a lot of people I think would love a little bit of a video about your life on the boat, and maybe we'll have to do a different webinar all about that. Not so much about Cicero, but about your family. And I think, Matt, what do you think? You think people will enjoy
Yeah,
that?
I think that sounds amazing. I've got a question to Paul. So, say I'm a parent. How does it work then? What's the process to go? So, I listen to this and go, oh wow, that sounds amazing. What's the process of then matching my my child with a tutor? So, so is the first step the website, and then what's the process after that?
First step's the website, and you can kind of see, the teachers we have and our philosophy, and then everything sort of leads to you send us an email. We have a little bit of a form. We'll just ask you some basic stuff like, the age of your child and priorities and stuff. And then I send back a whole bunch of information about how our courses are structured and different ideas, a bunch of videos. We have a YouTube channel with like a demo video on it, and a couple of other videos filmed by some of our students about, tips for being a self-directed learner and these kinds of things. So, we flood the parent with all that stuff. And then the next step, if they say, yeah, this is a model that could work for us, is I set up a phone call. We get on Zoom and I interview the family. And that interview is to figure out, okay, what are the priorities? What are the needs? What kind of a learner is this child? And I create a profile of the family and figure out what teachers are going to be a good fit for them. And I go off and talk to the teachers, put the profile in front of them, see because I want buy-in on both sides, basically, right? So, do these teachers look good to you, family? Okay, great. Does this family look good to you, teacher? Okay, then we put people together. And at that point, there's the option of doing a test class. So a single, meet and greet where it's more than a meet and greet. The teacher will come in and do an hour-long class. And if that works, then we create a schedule and they're off to the races.
Right. Yeah, because that's gonna be the question as well. If they don't hit it off, how does that work? Is that just I'm sorry, we don't. Yeah.
So that hasn't happened yet, but our policy that I just created in a vacuum is I'll find another teacher. So, if it's not and the teachers all know this, it's like a policy we've sent to them. If after the first or second class, and I have a scheduled check-in after the 5th class with every family where we sit down and like, how's it going? But long before that, the families know, like, if this is not a fit, they flag it to me. And we find a different teacher. And if we can't find a teacher, you get your money back.
Okay, thank you. And then with Cicero at the moment, what sort of subjects do you cover at the moment?
We cover the core, right? So English, maths, social science, hard science, and languages. And we have teachers for pretty much everything in there: physics, biology, Latin, Spanish. But we're also starting to bring in some teachers with some sort of off the wall topics. So we have a teacher who does animation. We have another teacher who teaches sort of digital arts and digital literacy. And so we're starting to put together an offering of those types of courses, whether they're, full credit semester long or whether they're a little shorter, that remains to be seen. Again, it's sort of flexible with the family, but we'd like to, educate. Like I said several times in this talk, my view is education is changing so fast, both from a demand and a supply point of view, that we'd love to be able to accommodate, people who want their kids to, have exposure to things outside the core.
Yeah. Well, I think what often happens is by the time the kids get to sort of secondary, a lot of them have really narrowed in. So I guess you're trying to address those core subjects initially, and then you can look at the others at a later time. Yeah.
I mean, this is an interesting difference with the US and really the rest of the world, right? So in the US, our students don't specialize. They go off to university without
it's more of a general qualification in a way, isn't it? Because I think the SATs are more of a
Yeah.
you know, covering a lot of information, aren't they?
Yeah, and the SATs are sort of tangential to, in fact, more they're not being used by American colleges. They are for homeschoolers, unfortunately, but no, I mean, a typical American student takes the core all the way through high school, graduates from high school with a general degree, doesn't have an area of specialization, goes to university, spends the first year or two figuring out what she wants to major in, and then selects her major. Whereas the rest of the world doesn't work that way. Here in South Africa, you're in your course of study by your junior year of high school, and that's where you're headed.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Paul. We're kind of coming to the end now, so I just want to thank you for joining us today. It's really been a very interesting hour, because this is just coming from such a different angle. It's you know, I think, you know, when you've been in as a home educator, you're right in there and you understand, you know, what people are looking for and what they need. So we do wish you every success with Cicero, and as I said, it'd be good to get a review up on the website, and certainly this webinar will be available for people to watch and to hear a little bit more about the product or the resource, you know, for themselves. So thank you very much, and we hope to talk to you some more, I think, on your lifestyle. I think that'll be a different one. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Juliet. This is a real treat.